This conference will now be recorded.
All right, I'll go ahead and read the declaration and then we'll call the meeting to order. So due to the nature of the declaration of a state of emergency due to novel coronavirus and COVID-19 and pursuant to code 2.2-3708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order. Stacy, could you go ahead and do the roll call for us?
Sure. From Stafford County, Alex Oziak.
Present.
Mr. Oziak is present. Brandon Brown. Brandon Brown is absent. Brian Council. Brian Council is absent. Jason Towery.
Here.
Jason Towery is present. From King George County, Nick Miner.
Present.
Nick Miner's present. Kimberly Wilson. Kimberly Wilson is absent. From Caroline County, Mike Fitchum. Mike Fitchum's absent. Craig Pennington. Craig Pennington's absent. From Spotsylvania County, Paul Legnello. Paul Legnello is absent. Rodney White.
Present.
Rodney White is present. Jacob Pastwick. Jacob Pastwick is absent. Leon Hughes. Leon Hughes is absent. And I do realize I'm calling alternates. It's just for roll call and attendance tracking. From Fred Transit, Aiden Quirk.
Present.
Aiden Quirk is present. Craig Reed. Craig Reed is absent. From the city of Fredericksburg, Jamie Jackson. Here. Jamie Jackson is present. Michael Craig.
Here.
Michael Craig. Oh, Michael Craig is present. From DRPT, Sierra Williams.
Morning, present.
Sierra Williams is present. Todd Horsley. Todd Horsley is absent. From VDOT, Michelle Shropshire. Michelle Shropshire is marked absent. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
Stephen Haynes is present. Jim Ponticello. Jim Ponticello is absent. Dan Grinnell.
Here.
Dan Grinnell is present. From VRE, Christine Hoffner.
Here.
Christine Hoffner is present. From Federal Highway, Richard Duran.
Here.
Richard Duran is present. From PRTC, Bob Schneider.
Present.
Bob Schneider is present. Joseph Stainsby. Joseph Stainsby is absent. From GW Ride Connect, Kate Gibson. I saw Kate on. Kate, I can't hear you, so I'm going to mark Kate Gibson as absent, but I'll double check with her. Lee Anderson. Lee Anderson is absent. And from Federal FTA, we have 2 vacancies. So is anyone on the line to represent the Federal Transit Administration? No. Okay, that concludes roll call, and we do have a quorum.
Stacy, this is Kate. I'm here. I had the wrong microphone input. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
This is the same for Bassam.
Paul Yellow, I'm here as well.
Paul is here. Thank you.
Bassam is here too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Stacy. Next, we'll move on to item number 3, which is approval of the today's agenda. Does anyone have any updates or changes to the agenda? All right, well, hearing none, I'll make a motion for approval. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, agenda's approved. Next, moving on to number 4 is the approval of the March 1st TAC meeting minutes. I do have one just minor edit there, and it is on page 5 under item 7I on the Transportation's Alternatives Funding. It mentions a Blackbird sidewalk, but it's actually Flatford sidewalk. And that's the only change I have. Is there anyone else has any kind of other edits? All right, well, hearing none, I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes with the edits as recommended. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, meeting minutes are approved. Number 5, I believe, which is update of the policy committee. Go ahead, Ian.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick comment. There were 3 decisions taken at the policy committee. The first one is to approve the amended MOU for the TPB. That's the Washington, D.C. and Greater Washington, D.C. area MPO. And that was approved by the policy committee. The other 2 items were to add new members to the CTAC and the BPAC. And then finally, I just wanted to point out to members the call for comment by the Census Bureau for their policy changes to their way they're going to be dealing with urban areas, etc., in their response or results from the 2020 census. In the chat box today, I've put the link to that particular item and the call for comment and so on. I did raise it at the policy committee, but I would really urge our jurisdictions to have a look at those policy changes. The possibility is that our jurisdictions' rate of population increase will not be as quick as we had anticipated if all of those new policies are implemented. And that should concern us because, as you know, the size of your urban area and the size of the population of your jurisdiction does affect over time things like funding allocations and other legal matters. So you really don't want to be counted less than you could. And if the policy stayed the same, you would just see X number of population increase. With these new policies, you're likely to see X number of population increase minus a number that is as a result of the changes. So it may see some of our jurisdictions see their official population increase for their urban areas not grow as quickly as they'd anticipated because of the nature of some of these amendments. So I would urge all of our jurisdictions to pay attention to those changes and submit comments from yourselves or objections as your particular jurisdictions feel about those particular changes. But do not ignore it. It's something which will affect our population size calculations for the next 10 years. And if we don't speak before the due date of the 20th of May, you won't get another chance. So I do urge you to talk to your jurisdictions about that item. It's quite important. But Mr. Chair, that's the only items I wanted to just highlight from the policy committee. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Do you have any further comments or questions for Ian regarding that?
Yeah, Alex, this is Paul. I actually did have a question for Ian on this. Given the importance of this, Ian, like would it make sense for FAMPO, maybe NGWC, to kind of write a letter just with comments on this by the deadline of May 20th?
Yeah, so Paul, it's my intention to draft a letter for the policy committee and to share it with them. The policy committee is likely to meet either on the 20th or just before the 20th. And so hopefully that letter will be in the pack and the policy committee can take a decision to send the letter and the chairperson can sign it and I will submit it on our behalf. But I'm just trying to encourage our jurisdictions to also send a letter, because the more comments I think they get, the better for us.
So when you have a draft of that letter, could you distribute that to kind of Spotsylvania and the other localities as well, so we can make sure that we're consistent?
I'll happily send it to you, yes.
Great.
All right, well, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to item number 6, public comment. I believe we haven't received any requests for public comment via online request, but wanted to check if there's anyone currently online who wish to make any comments. All right, well, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and move on to the discussion items. Starting with 7A, which is a 5307 little update I wanted to provide. Let me kind of get to my notes here. So as you might recall, at the March 22nd meeting, GWRC meeting, PRT staff gave a brief presentation on 5307 funding. And this kind of indicated there's about a little over $3 million in previous year FY18 through 21 5307 funding that has not yet been allocated to projects, in addition to several $1 million with the CARES funding that might be available to these transit agencies. And so kind of following a discussion by the policy committee, GWRC put out a call for projects which could possibly utilize this 5307 funding. I believe Kate wanted those projects submitted by April 2nd. And I believe PRTC is currently evaluating those projects for eligibility of 5307 funding, and should have that evaluation completed by April 19th, which would be in time for the next GWRC meeting. I believe PRTC will also be providing information on subrecipient eligibility, as well as kind of the program requirements. Ultimately, GWRC board is going to be responsible for allocating the 5307 funding to the specific projects. And then once those funds are awarded, the entity receiving those funds would have to enter into a subrecipient agreement with PRTC, and then PRTC would include the project in their grant application to the Federal Transit Administration. And so I know of particular significance to us here at FAMPO, we're kind of hoping that the additional 5307 funding will be awarded to the VRE platform improvement projects on Leland Road and Brook Road, in order to free up about $2.8 million in Cmax funding. And this could be utilized, certainly by us to help backfill some of these recent losses. We're going to be going over, I think, later on this morning about that, and help, provide funding in addition to GW Ride Connect and Spotsylvania's Route 1 Market Street project, and would kind of allow us to, rather than kind of cannibalizing our FY27 funds to backfill these losses, we could now use that FY27 funding for new projects. So that kind of is it for my update. I was hoping Kate would be on board to maybe provide any additional follow-up, but she's not here, so I'll try to answer any questions anyone might have.
I am here, Alex.
Okay, that's right, you did check in. I'm sorry about that, Kate. I don't know if you have anything else further you'd like to add on that?
I think that sums it up very well, so happy to take any questions anybody might have.
This is Christine with VRE. I have a question, comment that I'd previously forwarded to Kate and to Alex, but hadn't heard a response on the match requirements for 5307, and whether any allocations would of the current about 3 million, would that match be covered through soft match or other source, or would the recipient be responsible for the match? Because VRE does have a policy that any matches are the responsibility of the jurisdiction where the project's located.
Yeah, this is Kate. So my understanding is that the match requirement has already been taken care of through soft match of the rolling stock, the actual vans that are running within the Van Pool Alliance program. So I think Betsy Massey confirmed that. My understanding is at least through the funding that Alex mentioned that we kind of are looking at allocating right now, which is FY18 through FY21, I believe. And that's our budget year, not federal fiscal year. So those are two different things. But anyways, the funding that I included in the packet for the March 22nd GVRC board meeting, my understanding is all of that funding that's available right now to allocate has already been matched. So I can confirm that again with PRTC, but that's my understanding.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't clear about that. So, yeah, if you can confirm it now or later, that would be appreciated.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Jackson. Yes, that is correct. What Kate just mentioned is correct. The soft match or what would be the local match is already covered through soft match. So receiving it would almost appear like it's 100% money, but it's not. Obviously, it has a local soft match.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for that clarification, Kate and Jamie. And if there's no further questions, I guess we can go ahead and move on to item 7B, which is the CMAQ STVG allocation presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we're going to do today is to just run over where we are in the process so that everybody understands what's going on. So we've got a couple of presentations. I'm going to handle the first couple of slides, and then we have additional FAMPO staff taking over from me. So if we can move to the next slide. So we initiated the call for projects for the new round of CMAQ and STBG, I beg your pardon. So in March, we notified VDOT that our funds, we were notified by VDOT, sorry, that our funds have decreased by 10 to 15% per year, totaling this amount that I think Alex was referring to just now of 2.7 million total reduction across the two programs, which was quite a surprise to us. The explanation we got is that it's largely as a result of the poor performing economy during COVID. And so funding has been cut across all MPOs in Virginia, not just ourselves. And we have checked that it's quite a similar cut to others in the state of Virginia. So staff scored the new projects which have come in as a result of the call, and we've created a draft allocation outlay. We have looked at funding the Route 1 Market Street project. We have allocated in the proposal that's going to be shown to you in a little while the FY27 funds to projects that have had FY22 to 26 funds that were potentially eligible to receive FY27 funding in order to try and make that whole. And there's a transfer of funds from current SIP years 22 to 26 to ensure that there were no negative CMAQ and STBG balances as per VDOT regulations. We can't get below a zero balance. We've also intentionally reserved $100,000 of CMAQ and STBG in FY27, and we've not made new allocations to new projects. So that is what you're going to see in the pack in a moment, and that is what we're calling at the moment the B plan. And that spreadsheet, that plan shows that what will have to be done if we do not get other funding, such as a potential swap with 5307 funding, which would release the funding that is currently on other projects. If that doesn't happen, the spreadsheet in your pack today is what we have tried to do to make the program whole if we don't get any other funding. So that's what you will see in your pack. It's a draft, and there may still be some small changes from the side of VDOT, which we'll have to get back to you on when we get those changes. And then, as Alex has suggested, there is a hope by many that we will get this potential 5307 swap on a couple of projects, which are essentially VRE projects, which would make the CMAQ STBG funding that is on the VRE projects available for us to allocate to other projects. Next slide. So this shows you where the funding adjustments have been made. You can see on the right-hand side the total reductions in each case. 1.6 million and 1.1 million respectively, which adds up to that 2.7 that we were talking about earlier. And you can see which years the reductions occur in. Next slide. This is just a reminder of the current picture before any adjustments have been made. So we just included this slide so you know what we have before the new financial year and before any adjustments are made. You've seen this before. I'm now going to hand over to, I believe it's Jordan, to talk about the new projects that have come in after our call for projects and how those projects have been scored. Just bear in mind, we've not put any money to these projects in the draft that you're going to see later on, because we had to first deal with a 2.7 million shortfall or drop in funding, which we then had to make whole. So currently, none of these projects have been allocated funding. If something changes, we can then allocate funding to these projects. But I'll just hand over to Jordan to run through these. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. So if we move to the next slide, these projects were scored with the new methodology that was approved by the policy committee back in February. And this includes the benefit to the TMA measure, which is only for the STBG applications. And so now we're kind of going to present the draft allocation. So if we move on to the next slide, this shows all the projects that were submitted for CMAQ funding. And I'll go into a little bit of detail for each one of these in a minute. And then the next slide shows the STBG projects. Then you can move on to the next slide. So from Fred Regional Transit, we had 2 applications. The first one is for 3 bus replacements. So this is the purchase of new low sulfur diesel buses. And this received an 80 out of 100 for both CMAQ and STBG scoring. And as you'll see on each slide, it has the more detailed versions of the score, but I will just review the general overall score, and that information is in the packet for you to review in detail. So the next application from Fred was for the trolley bus. This is a purchase of a transit trolley bus and received a 65 for both CMAQ and STBG scoring. On the next slide from Stafford County, we have the Onville Road Improvement Project. This aligns Barrett Heights Road and Garrison Woods Drive, includes a 5-foot sidewalk, turn lanes, and the 2-way left turn lane down the center of the roadway. This received on the next slide a score of 83 for CMAQ and 81 for STBG. The next project is Garrisonville Road Widening. This is widening the road to 6 lanes. It includes a 5-foot sidewalk, 2 new bus shelters at existing Fred transit stops, and medium crossover lanes. And on the next slide, this received a score, or this is the review of the score. This is the first half. The scoring was so large, we had to cut it in 2 parts. So this is the second half, and received an 82 since this was only applied for STBG funds. And then for Spotsylvania, exit 126 interchange improvements. This is improving 3 intersections at Route 1 and Market, Route 1 in the northbound ramp at 95, and Route 1 in the southbound ramps. And then on the next slide, it received a CMAQ score of 91 and an STBG score of 84. The next project by Spotsylvania is the Northwest Quadrant roadway at Route 1, Hood Drive, and Mine Road. This creates a quadrant roadway, and instead of the 3rd signal at the off of Hood Drive, it'll be a roundabout and not that signal. And for the scoring, it received an 83 in CMAQ and a 67 or 76 in STBG. And then for the Spotsylvania New Transit and Leased Commuter Parking, this was scored in 2 ways to look at the parking commuter lots, and then also the VRE bus feeder service for the county. And this will also include marketing funding and promote that's the new services, and then leased commuter spaces. And so on the next slide for the operating assistant score, it received an 85. And then the next slide for the commuter parking lots, it received an 81. And then lastly on the projects, we received 2 requests for CMAQ funding of $125,000 off the top allocation. from GW Ride Connect, and also funding for 105 leased commuter parking spaces. And these were not scored, as these were just requested in a letter. And then finally, we show the Cmax scores for these projects, and these projects are separated by their improvement type. So only the same improvement type can be scored based on, or compared with their final score based on the same product in that category. And then the last slide again has the STBG scores for comparison. And I can take any questions.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Jason. I'd really like to understand the scoring for exit 126 interchange and the Northwest Quadrant interchange for STBG.
Adam, if you could scroll back up to either one of those. Do you have any specific questions from the scoring slides? If any of these are standing out to you as a concern?
I guess if you could just walk us through it. It's the first time I'm seeing these scores.
Yeah, so each of the methodologies that are in the Cmax STBG methodology prioritization document has descriptions of how each one of these measures are created. So the top header is just an overall category and how it will be measured. And then we use data from GIS layers, also from VDOT pathways for planning to create these scores. And so that's how these scores are created. And if you want to read more about specific ones, I would refer you to the methodology to have the most accurate detail of how these scores were created.
Well, I appreciate that, Jordan. Can you just at a high level explain how this particular project scored so high at a 91?
Yeah,
what exactly maybe the project is?
Yeah, if you scroll up to the one slide, Adam, I can review what the project is. So on the right-hand side of the slide, there are three circles that are highlighted, circle 1, circle 3, and circle 4. This project is currently underway for getting a divergent diamond intersection study that's happening right now. However, that study has not been completed. So the overall goal for Spotsylvania is to have that improvement. At this time, this is all the information that we can score based off. So we have 3 different intersection improvements at Market Street, at the northbound ramp, and at the southbound ramps. So that's what the improvements will be. And then going to the next slide. So the first one is level of service. That is used or created by our air quality tool and measures the reduction of.
Jordan, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
Is there a way, maybe Paul, could you explain what the improvements are at the intersections?
Yeah, I would be happy to add on to what Jordan said. If you could just please go back to kind of the graphic. Great. So this is a companion project to the Smart Scale project from round 4. The Smart Scale project in round 4 was basically primarily widening northbound Route 1 to northbound 95 to widen that ramp movement from 1 to 2 lanes. This project is doing the same thing in the southbound direction. Both projects are connected to the VA. And basically the big improvement is basically on southbound Route 1 at intersection 4. There would be a double left turn lane, which right now there's just 1 lane, and then basically that on-ramp basically onto southbound 95 would be 2 lanes instead of 1. Additionally, there are some intersection improvements at a number 1, number 3, and number 2. I'll say kind of the ultimate improvement basically here is to do a diverging diamond interchange similar to what Stafford has up at exit 140. Basically, there's an active study being done basically by VDOT for that. The southbound improvements are kind of on a quicker time frame, given that the VA is opening up in January 2024. We would like it to be ready not that long after that opening occurs. The Diverging Diamond Interchange, though, is a little longer term. That may not be until 2031.
So I have another question, and maybe this is Michelle from VDOT. So our Shelton Shop project got kicked out because of the smart scale funding, and because the Shelton Shop was a smart scale project. I guess in this case, is VDOT, I guess I'm trying, so Paul, you're saying this is a completely separate project from the smart scale project?
Yeah, this is in the southbound direction. The northbound basically is a smart scale project, and this is not requesting funding for that. This is in the southbound direction for the southbound 95 on-ramp improvement.
And VDOT doesn't consider this to perhaps be splitting hairs? I mean, we're talking about an overall intersection improvement here that has significant smart scale funding on it already.
Jason, just to clarify, this project does not have any smart scale funding on
it. Yeah, like I said, there's no consideration here that perhaps this is splitting hairs. VDOT, Michelle? Okay.
It looks like Kathy Coffey might have just joined us. She might be able to answer.
I'm sorry, Alex, I just now connected. I was on another meeting until 10. I'm not sure what the question is.
Hey, Kathy, it's Jason Towery. I guess, well, at this point, maybe we can follow up at another time. At a high level, I'm trying to understand the scoring and the distribution of STBG, CMAC, and smart scale funding to projects. One of the projects we had submitted for CMAC and STBG funding was the Shelton Shop project, which was kicked out because of some of the smart scale funding we got. Spotsylvania was just awarded a significant amount of smart scale funding for their intersection 126 improvements and Hood Drive, some other areas over there. And I'm trying to understand how they're able to apply also for STBG and CMAC funding at exit 126 at the same intersection, and how that's not splitting hairs. I guess technically this has a different UPC.
I think we're going to have to look to see, this is Susan, sorry. I think we're going to have to look to see where these two, if there's any overlap of the two projects. I think we'll have to look at the application that they receive funds on and then this application to make sure that there is not an overlap. Because I mean, we just have this little bit that we see on the screen here, and we would need to go back to the actual application and compare the two to make sure that there is no overlap. With that, I mean, I think that's the only way we're going to be able to give you a satisfactory answer, Jason, because we literally are just seeing these for the first time, just like you are.
Right. No, I appreciate that.
And I think that's what, and we refer back to the applications in our smart scale portal all the time to make sure that we are staying within guidelines that have been outlined by the smart scale process. And we would have to do the same thing for this. So I don't think anybody here at VDOT can actually make a decision on it right now because we don't have any more information than you have right here in front of you. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
Hey, Jason, this is Adam. I'll just offer too that as far as the applications go, we can go ahead and post those to the webpage that we have on our website for CMAC STBG, so everybody can see those afterwards to know exactly sort of what we scored. I'll say too that from our point of view, we didn't kick out the Shelton Shop project. Our understanding is, and VDOT can correct me if I'm wrong here, but if it receives smart scale funding, it's been fully funded, so it doesn't need funds after that point. So it's not that we wanted to kick it out, it's just that based on the action that the board took and assuming the CTB approves that, it has all the funding it needs. And then we did not score any of the smart scale round 4 elements of the Spotsylvania proposal for this project. So again, we can post that to the website so everybody can take a look.
So I guess my question would be is if the CTB doesn't approve Shelton Shop, then would you all go back and rescore the projects?
I think that's a fair question. Sure, that would make sense. That came in by the deadline, so that's something that we can definitely do. And I'm hoping that we'll know, I guess, next Monday or Tuesday whether that's going to happen.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any more questions for the team, or can we move on to the next presentation? We'll certainly post those for everybody to have a look at. And yes, once we've got the smart scale results, we can review, Mr. Chair, how any projects might have been affected by the smart scale results and make some adjustments accordingly.
Just to make sure, we can add projects to the secondary 6-year plan. Oh, I'm sorry, been so used to saying that, to the 6-year plan up until the June for it to be approved by July 1st. Okay, so just to make sure that everybody understands that we have that ability. If anything needs to be added at the last minute, we can do so.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll go on to the next one.
Yeah, please do.
And the next part is the draft budget, which Adam will walk you through. Remember, this is a draft and it will change possibly once we hear the results of the GWRC meeting decision on the 5307 funding. If they do not shift any 5307 funding to any projects that would free up funding for us, then this is the kind of thing we would need to do in order to make our project whole. So Adam and Jordan have done a lot of work on this, and they're just going to run through it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ian. The text is probably pretty small, so if I can zoom into anything in particular for anybody, please let me know. But just at a high level, a few comments, as Ian mentioned, this is very much option B for us. We're hoping that this is nothing more than a stopgap for right now. We did want to present something as a draft this month for the committee to review, but again, this assumes what we know right now, which is no 5307 allocations. We also did receive a note from VDOT last week that there's a chance that even aside from that possibility that some of the budgets might increase before the CTB takes action on the FY22 to 27 outlay. So just to point out the few projects that are affected by the sort of backfill exercise that we went through, we went ahead and for the 3 projects that were submitted for kind of smart scale round 4 toward the middle of last year, we went ahead and put the FY27 funds on those projects in a like-for-like dollar amount way. So there's no new allocations that we're attempting to do here. Again, we are leaving about $100,000 in both programs for FY27, and we also wanted to put some of a increase or a balance in the near term in case we get other projects that have cost estimate increases and that type of thing. So we did leave about $43,000 in STBG for FY23. So just to list the projects that have funding that has moved a little bit in one direction, and again, this is on a like-for-like dollar amount basis, is the Route 28 Lafayette project in Spotsylvania County. That's project number 29. The Onville Road project in Stafford County. That's project number 28. The Idlewild VCR connector project. That's project 27 in the city. The Enon Road project in Stafford County. And then the Route 3 Stars improvements in the city. And then what this also does is it does reflect the action taken by the policy committee last September to go ahead and fully fund the Market Street project. So that is fully meeting the request that was made in September of 2020. Again, just wanted to keep this at a high level for now and hope that this is nothing more than a stopgap at this point, but happy to take any questions based on where we are today.
This for us is the worst case scenario. This means that there will be no additional funding that VDOT has found to slightly increase the allocations. It will mean that there's no money left over from prior projects which we can reallocate, and it assumes that we will not get any 5307 swap. So this is literally, in our view, the worst case scenario, but we needed to do this because we needed to look at what it would do.
Hey, Ian, this is Paul. I had a question. Just given the fact that it seems like traffic is rebounding on 95 and a lot of the other roads, is there a possibility in the future that kind of for the out years, like 23 to 27, that these budgets will rebound next year so the deficit won't be as large as it currently is?
Paul, that's a very important question, and we did have some discussion with VDOT about it. I wonder if Susan wants to give a comment soon as she is online about the probability or possibility that it could rebound next year.
So I think, let me clarify why we took the big reduction. And I think it was a double whammy. First off, we had the lack of the feds taking action on the FAST Act legislation that expired in September. That's one thing. Then we had the pandemic, which lowered all of our revenues. That was the second thing. So I think that's where across the board, we took the biggest hit. And I think in the future, when we get a new Transportation Act back in play and the revenues start moving back up, I feel that these numbers will go back up, and we will probably be able to fill back in where we've taken away and then be able to add projects on. So hopefully maybe next year the rebound will happen, because by then we're hoping that there'll be a Transportation Act in place and the revenues are going to probably start, because traffic has started going back up too. So I am hoping. This is usually we hit a bottom and then we go back up. So hopefully we do.
Are there any other questions for Adam? Mr. Chair, obviously we'll revisit this again once we know some more information from VDOT in terms of any adjustments that they're able to make around the CTB meeting, and also if the GWRC board makes any decision about 5307, we'll obviously revisit this, and we are quietly in the background working on an A plan, which has the additional funding available, which looks much better than this particular picture.
All right, yeah, thanks, Ian. Hopefully we can find out some news here soon about the 5307 funding, and then we can go with option A. That makes things a lot easier on our end.
And hopefully VDOT might find another few dollars lying around that could help as well. So between those two, hopefully we'll have a much better thing to present.
All right, excellent. If there's no further questions, then I guess we go ahead and move on to item 7C, which is the 2050 LRTP update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Today we're asking for support for the roadway prioritization methodology. So Adam will go ahead and go through that, and then we're going to present you with a draft for the following two prioritization methodologies, which is for transit TDM and also for bike and ped. So really today is the first time you're going to look at most of the prioritization methodologies in one day. And the roadway one you've seen all many times before. We did the workshop and Adam is going to present the results of that. And we're hoping that you'll support this one today. And then the other two are just the first draft. So you'll have a lot more time to think through those and make amendments and so on. So I'll hand over to Adam.
Great, thanks Ian, and thanks Mr. Chair. Just to quickly summarize, so we did have the March 19th TAC workshop, so thanks to those who participated in that. We had a good discussion that day. I think everybody by now has seen our evaluation measures for the roadway projects a couple times. So I'm going to skim through those pretty quickly so that we can focus on the two new modes that are going to be presented today. So before asking the chair to entertain a motion, I did want to highlight a few parts of the discussion from the workshop a couple weeks ago. So That being said, just real quick, if anybody does have any questions on the measures, I'm happy to address those, but these have not changed in any way since the March 1st TAC meeting. So like I said, at the March 19th workshop, we sort of landed on the fact that projects would be initially scored and evaluated regardless of their cost. So we don't have cost or cost effectiveness as a measure for scoring projects from the start. And so we had a bit of a discussion about sort of if it was necessary, and if so, to what extent to sort of factor in either cost or cost effectiveness. So what we are proposing at this point is that in order to have a project list that meets the fiscal constraint requirements, that we would assess cost effectiveness to identify potential exceptions to the eventual list that we come up with. So we have a couple graphics to illustrate that on the next couple slides. At a pretty high level, it's a little bit simplified, but you'll get the gist of what we're going for. And then what we're going to try and do, so we've now presented the roadway evaluation measures. You're going to see the active transportation and then the transit TDM measures today for the first time. And then we're going to put those 3 different modes into a document that's going to spell out part of the process. And so you'll see that next month as well in May. But again, as far as the cost effectiveness, sort of using that to identify exceptions, here's a graphic that sort of, again, at a very high level, explains what we're going for. So the project scores that come out, we'll have everything by mode, sorted by score. We have a fiscal constraint cutoff. We're just using $20 million here for an example. And so this is what it would look like just out of the box with the process that we currently have. And so what we would then do sort of behind the scenes is look at cost effectiveness. So we'd be looking at the total project cost divided by the average annual daily traffic, or AADT. And so we come up with a list that's sort of secondary that again looks like this. And then taking that information, what we would do is look at any exceptions where we should potentially move some projects up into the constrained list based on the fact that they are highly cost effective, if you will. And there's other projects that are not cost effective to drop those below. So here with project D, for example, it has a cost of 2.5 million. And then on the previous slide, it's the most cost-effective project in the whole list. And so we would take that information and move it up from what would have not been at first on the constrained list to move it above that threshold. And so that's sort of the exercise that we would do after the fact once projects are scored for each of our 3 project lists. Again, that's something that we'll spell out in more detail in the actual methodology document, which you'll see next month, but we did want to summarize the outcome of the conversation from the workshop on the 19th. So I'll take any questions on that before seeing if Mr. Chair would like to entertain a motion for approval of the roadway scoring.
Yeah, Adam, this is Paul. Can you just give an example, like, of a project that kind of would have kind of this cost effectiveness issue kind of applying to it?
Are you asking about a real world project, Paul, or just a hypothetical example?
Yeah, I was just wondering about a real world project. I'm just trying to understand the process a little bit better.
We haven't tested it out, Paul, and I don't necessarily have any actual projects in mind, but this is the type of thing where if there's a, think about, for instance, so here's one maybe, the Route 1 and Augustine Avenue project in the city that is going to be funded via Smart Scale in Round 4. It's a very low cost project. It might not, and I'm guessing on this part, it might not be the highest scoring project just based on the scores, but it's very low cost, and so it would have a high cost effectiveness measure. So if that, for instance, was one of the projects that was near that cutoff line, so if it's the project that was, say, the lowest scoring project out of the full list of 100, we would just sort of leave it. But if the cutoff is, say, at 50 and it was the 54th project, that's the type of thing where we want to take a closer look at it to see if it's something that we should put on the constrained list.
Okay. And I guess would that be done on like a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, that would be a case-by-case basis, and that's where we intentionally want to build in a little bit of flexibility so that it's not just a rigid out-of-the-box approach that we take. I think that we've got to build in I think some guardrails where we don't want to be too quantitative in this approach. And of course, we've built in some qualitative measures to the project scoring, but we also want to be able to identify projects that are right below that cutoff. So, you know, the projects that will be on the bubble, if you will, if you're, you know, making a bracket for March Madness, where we want to take a look at those and see if they meet, you know, a very high cost effectiveness measure that we would, you know, potentially move those up.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there's no further questions or discussion, would anyone like to make a motion to go ahead and recommend approval for these measures?
Mr. Chair, this is Nick Miner. I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt as presented.
All right, is there a second?
Mr. Chair, Jamie Jackson, I second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Is there any opposed? All right. Motion passes. And we'll go ahead and recommend those to the policy committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now we'll ask our presenters on the staff team to go through the transit TDM study and then the active transportation bike ped study. These are your first draft, so no action is required today, but this gives you a chance to see what we're planning and then can give us comments and we'll work on any changes and suggestions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ian. I will take it away here. So the topics, of course, as Ian mentioned, going through the two methodologies and their measures, the proof of concepts for each, and then the next steps that we're looking towards. So for the first section, transit TDM, these measures and their weighting stays the same as the roadway methodology and follows SMART scale. So all your topics are the same weightings. We have statewide coordination measures and project benefit measures as well, the same as roadway. So the first set here, safety and congestion mitigation are on your screen. We've made some tweaks as to how these go to fit with transit. So for safety, for instance, this is just a straight set of how much safer will individuals be with the project. So looking at park and ride lots and transit services and scoring it based on the type of project. Congestion mitigation, looking at how many additional people could be transported by the project. So looking at ridership, and then just specifying the metrics based on a project-to-project basis. And then the second measures here for traffic congestion are similar to roadway, using the level of service. Next slide. And then accessibility, so quite similar to the roadway methodology, looking at multimodal components, the multimodal choices, disadvantaged populations, and then we have an additional one here on very similar transit-oriented populations. So using a data set that came from the 2019 Lafayette Boulevard multimodal study, as well as the same data set was used in the I-95 transit TDM study. So just scoring projects based on the number of transit-oriented populations within a distance from the project. So just as we're calling it, a TOP score, as you see on the right side here. Next slide. And then environmental quality, quite similar, though the second one deals with the impact of the vehicles and how many might be going through a certain area, as well as just what type of project it is that would delineate its impact. And then economic development, excuse me, looking at the Virginia or VEDP sites and local land use, same as roadway. Next slide. And then local land use or land use coordination, same as roadway, just looking at the number of jobs and populations within half a mile. So you'll note that this is a different distance than the roadway methodology. We've employed that in a couple of areas to fit within the transit TDM project scopes a bit better. So just the jobs and population for the 2017 year, as well as the 2050 year. So like the current and then the future populations for the data sets that we have available. Next slide. And then statewide coordination, quite similar again. However, with this, for the second two measures, we're looking at just different needs. So the needs of transit access to activity centers or transit demand management, as well as transit access to equity emphasis areas. And it's just scored based on the priority listed by VTrans. Next slide. And then again, project benefit. This one I believe is quite similar, the same as roadway, just more of a staff look with written justification as to how the project may benefit residents in the region. Next slide. So in the proof of concept for the existing projects, there's not that many transit projects, so you'll see I've only scored about 7 here, but we have employed different types of projects, so bus routes, infrastructure, park and ride lots, and VRE, and you can see how those are scored here on the right side. And I do expect the projects to have a little bit further gap between their scores when we add in some of the more project benefit or staff-based evaluation measures. Next slide. So of interest, of course, this is a random sampling, but choosing projects across multiple categories from the 2045 LRTP. As mentioned, using a neutral project benefit score for testing purposes, as these are more qualitative in nature. A couple of items, as I mentioned earlier, will require ridership numbers, so those will be updated based on a project-to-project basis based on their estimated riderships. And then, of course, expect more variation in scores based on updated items. Next slide. I believe that is it, and I'll now pass it off to Carrie for the active transportation measures.
So good morning. As you can see, active transportation is much like the other modes, but we've changed the weights so they're more appropriate for bike and pedestrian. We've got safety at 1/4, 25%, because that's better for bike and ped. Congestion mitigation, 5%, accessibility 15%, and everything else is 5%. 2 other factors as well, statewide coordination at 10% and project benefit at 30%. Next slide, please. So our safety is composed of 4 factors: separation, 35% degree to which a project is separated from traffic, crashes, barriers, and connections. That is the degree to which the project connects to existing pieces of infrastructure or provides safe crossing of a barrier. The last one is pedestrian safety action plan corridor, and that will be explained on another slide. Next slide. So, PSAP. The Virginia Department of Transportation has a methodology for prioritizing corridors and locations for pedestrian improvements throughout Virginia. They have a ranking of 1 to 3, and there are detailed maps for the highest priority locations. This accounts for systemic risk in the system. It'll be explained on another slide. Go ahead on the next one. So these are the criteria. They take into account the AADT, the presence of 0 vehicle households in the area, transit access, the health opportunity index, the roadway geometry like line of sight and curves and things like that, the employment density, proximity to a school, the posted speed limit. Lower factors are the crash history, proximity to a park, population density. At first, in PSAP, they were taking into account alcohol-related crashes and the poverty, the density of poverty in the area, but they found that that wasn't really a factor for risk, so they took those out. Next slide. So this is an example of PSAP corridors. This is for the city of Fredericksburg, but this is done for all of the jurisdictions. It's based on demand for infrastructure and the risk of crashes. Next slide. So the next category is congestion mitigation. And as you know, we don't have a huge number of cyclists, so we can't really do much about congestion by cycling. So we decided to use an analogous idea. Does the project increase biking and walking as transportation rather than just as recreation? So that's that factor. Next slide. Accessibility at 15% has 3 factors. Can we get to activity centers and how many? Does it connect to other multimodal choices like transit, park and ride lots, and how many of them are within 1 mile of the project? Does it serve disadvantaged populations? Does it provide a benefit to those populations or perhaps even a harm? Next slide. Economic development at 5%. The number of available Virginia Economic Development Partnership sites near the location of the project. So how does it promote economic development? The next one is local land use, total square mileage of commercial and industrial zoning. Next slide. Land use coordination. This one is self-explanatory. Current jobs and population, future jobs and future population. Next slide. And statewide coordination. So does it meet a VTrans need? And what is the priority of the VTrans need? Next slide. So this is an example of the priority corridors and whether or not the project is located on one of those priority corridors. Next slide. So the last one is project benefit. Is it recommended in a study and how well does it align with the study recommendations? Improvement impact. This is one of the qualitative factors. The staff will determine the project's overall benefit. How well does it achieve what it set out to do? Does it have a regional benefit? Does it provide for interregional transportation? Does it connect to something like the East Coast Greenway or another major trail? Does it meet the strategic goals of the LRTP? Next slide. So you can see here all of the draft evaluation measures. These are in your packet and you can go over them at your leisure. And the last thing we've got here is taking all of these into consideration. Matthew ran some test projects and he can go over and let you know how they all scored.
Yeah, so thank you, Carrie. So I ran, of course, a set of, I think, 12 test projects, several in each jurisdiction and several of varying types. So bike lanes, shared use paths, sidewalks, larger, smaller funded projects, and shown are on the right are their scores. So again, I would definitely expect more variation in scores as we do actual scoring and have items on project benefit and other staff-based analysis measures. Thank you.
Let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, and me as well, and our emails are there if you guys would like to submit any further comments. Thank you.
Hey, Carrie, this is Paul. I had a question regarding just the VTrans measure just for kind of like pet projects. I guess at a high level, like how many of our bike ped priorities do we think are captured by VTrans? Just because VTrans I always think of being more major projects.
Right, but VTrans does have, one of their goals is increasing bicycle and pedestrian trips. So 50% of that, if you go to, Adam, go to the slide that talks about, oh, there it is. It's so tiny, sorry. It's very tiny on my screen. Yeah, does it meet a VTrans need? Yes, all of them do. But for VTrans need 2, what is the priority of the VTrans need? There's a ranking of 1 to 4, and they're on these priority corridors. This is a draft map for VTrans, but in a later iteration, there's an interactive map that shows rankings of 1 through 4, and there are bicycle and pedestrian corridors with rankings. So yes, it does cover bike ped. But you can even see in this draft map, there's bicycle in purple. Sorry, this is so tiny for me, sorry. Pedestrian in purple, I believe, and bicycle in blue. Well, yeah, you can see it there. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, I guess it seems like it's more kind of in the core areas. Like if you had a sidewalk project or a kind of a bike project that was more in a outlying area, it seems like it might not meet a V-Trans need.
Remember that 50% of the V-Trans need is simply to increase bicycle and pedestrian trips, and this is only 10% of the entire score in the first place, statewide coordination. And then 50% of that 10% is an automatic yes. And the other 50% is does it occur on one of these corridors? And as you can see from this map, all of those blue corridors are in outlying areas.
But I guess if it's white, it would kind of not be, it would not receive any points.
When you get to the white areas?
Yes.
That's correct. But that is a small, at that point, you're at a very small part of the score.
The white areas would still receive the 50% of the points, Paul, because they would still get it still is a bike path, so it would still score 50% automatically.
So I guess I'll just kind of make the comment, like if you have like a trailway, something like the VCR trail, which is kind of transversing the region, like that's a east-west route going out to the Orange County line. If we were to try to kind of get a portion of that in that white area, seems like that would not score very well in this methodology for this metric.
It would get half of the points for that particular metric. It would still get number 1. And it would get, depending on where it was located on the VCR trail, it would still get number 2, because part of the VCR trail, in fact, most of the VCR trail is still located on the corridor. I'm looking at that map.
Hey, Carrie and Paul, if I could jump in, this is Adam. On the map that we have in the presentation, that was when the needs were being established. OAP has put out a portal that Carrie referenced that has all of the needs that have been prioritized. So that might not be exactly one-to-one the map that's in the packet, so we can look into that.
Yes, Paul, I could get back to you after referencing the more current map and see if it handles the more rural areas better.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to do that. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll just go ahead and say these two last prioritization methodologies, this is just your first side of them today. And I do encourage everyone to send their comments and questions. And like Paul has just done, point out a particular project that you're concerned won't score highly. We can then run the numbers on it, check how it scores. And we're still able to tweak these two methodologies because this isn't the final one. So we do welcome people emailing Matthew and Carrie and giving suggested changes so we can rework any little aspects of it that might not work in some way. And then, you know, by the time we bring back for a decision, we've incorporated all of those concerns and dealt with them.
All right, great. Yeah, and thanks Matthew and Carrie again for the presentation there and those metrics for the transit and all. That looks interesting. All right, I guess next we'll move on to item 7D, which is a 2045 LRTP amendment. And Adam, I guess you can give us an update on this one.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple notes today. We've made a few updates to the project lists in the LRTP. So we are going to be asking the policy committee next Monday to kick off a public comment period for the LRTP amendment. So just wanted to remind everybody to take a look through the spreadsheets here that are in the packet to see if there's anything else that needs to be updated. I believe at this point we've received feedback from VDOT, from Spotsylvania County, and I believe some from the city as well. So if there's anything else that looks amiss or needs to be updated here, please let us know if you can by this Wednesday so that we can include that in the packet for our policy committee. I will say though that it is not extremely time sensitive. We can receive comments at any point over the next month or so until this is slated for approval on May 20th. So if there's any questions today, I'm happy to take them. But just before I do, I did want to point out just a couple updates that were made since this was presented to the TAC last month. One is, I think we incorrectly listed the project in the city from Smart Scale Round 4 that's slated for funding for the VCR trail. I think we had the Idlewild shared use path listed last time, which is incorrect. It should have been the Idlewild VCR trail connector, so that has been corrected. We've also made a few adjustments to the PE studies list to add some of the ongoing work that's going on in Spotsylvania County regarding the 126 interchange to go on the studies list. So just wanted to point out those two updates. And again, if you have any questions or comments, happy to take them now, or if possible, by Wednesday for our packet for the policy committee.
All right, yeah, Adam, I know from my end for Stafford there, I think I provided you with some cost updates, but I don't see them reflected here, so I'll make sure I can dig up that email and send it back over to you again.
Thanks.
And Adam, this is Jamie. I'm not sure what updates you received from the city, but if you did not receive any, can you please email me and CC Mike Craig?
Sure, Jamie. I think we did get something from you on this, but I will go back and look at my notes and make sure that we're all squared away with your projects.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, and if there's nothing further, I guess we're ready to move on to item 7E, which is the Jordan's going to provide a tip update.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So the first update we have is an administrative modification. So this requires no action by the board, no public comment. So back in mid-March, DRPT reached out for one of their projects to have an update in funding. It was related to mobility management. So Adam's scrolling through the email and also the updated costs that were provided. So overall, the funding source increased by $8,000, but where the funding was coming from was the main change. And then the second request that came in from DRPT, again at the same time, same email, was for paratransit vehicles. This was a new project they'd like us to add. It received federal fundings, but at this time there's no local match required. And additionally, neither one of these projects needs to have air quality conformity determinations made because the first one's just an administrative modification, and then this one is considered exempt since it's for transit. And then this project here for paratransit will need to go to a 30-day public comment period as it has a new addition to the TIP. So this will be coming up next week at the policy committee. We will be asking them to put out a public comment period for this. So I can take any questions on either one of these revisions.
All right, well, hearing no questions, thank you, Jordan, for that update. I think next, I guess Adam's going to provide another update on the FY22 UPWP.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few notes on the UPWP for next year. So this went out, of course, in the packet last week. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to at least skim through this. No significant changes to the format or the structure from FY21. I'll mention a couple items that are pending at this point, both related to studies. One is that 2 of our regional studies, and I'll just scroll to the page that has this real quick, may wrap up in FY21. So that's the Lafayette Boulevard study phase 2. So this may be completed in FY21, but it may carry over into early FY22. Same thing goes for the Route 1 Masterponic STAR study that's ongoing right now. So that also might carry over into FY22. So we're leaving both in the draft UPWP at this point. We're also awaiting news on the funding of the multimodal east-west mobility study that Ian has talked about a couple times now in our FAMPO meetings. So this is not set in stone yet. We should hear within the next month or so if we are going to receive the DRPT technical assistance grant for this study effort. So we are asking here too for any questions or comments before asking the policy committee next Monday to have us hold a public comment on the UPWP. So I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Yeah, Adam, this is Paul. I had a question on the Lafayette Boulevard study.
Sure.
So that study hasn't met in a while, and in terms of just its completion, doesn't it still have a fair ways to go where that would definitely go into FY22?
I would say, Paul, at this point, it's likely it will carry over into FY22. We are in the process of working with VDOT and with Baker to set up a stakeholder meeting, so we're hopeful that that will take place either this week or next. And we have spoken a little bit with Baker, and they've informed us that once we have that stakeholder meeting and they get feedback on what they've been working on the last month or so, there's not a whole lot to go at that point. So I don't have a completion percentage number to give you right now, but it is likely that it will carry over into FY22, but hopefully not more than a month or 2.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And I see a question from Jamie in the chat. Let me just read this real quick. Oh, this might be just to me. I can address that with Jamie offline.
Mr. Chair, I have been encouraging all of the stakeholders to get the Lafayette Boulevard study phase 2 complete. So I'm going to carry on encouraging VDOT and the consultant to get that one done. Currently, VDOT took over management of this project in the time when FAMPO didn't have an administrator, and they're still looking after the project in terms of wrapping it up. But I am encouraging all stakeholders to get this project completed as soon as possible. I think it has gone on for a long time. A lot of the technical work has now been done. It's a question of, getting buy-in to the technical work that's been done, checking that it's correct, checking that all stakeholders are happy with it, and it should be able to wrap up before too long. So hopefully we can finish it soon.
And Ian and Adam, when's the next meeting for that study?
I believe that VDOT has been asking everybody to give proposed dates in the next 2 weeks when they'd be available to actually have the meeting. I believe Linda Lasute has been handling collating those dates as VDOT is still in charge in terms of managing the project. I'm not sure if she's online right now, but she's definitely the person who's handling the setting up of that meeting. It should be within the next 2 weeks or so. I believe you've all been sent emails if you're an interested or affected party or a stakeholder.
This is Linda. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure before I gave the update. That was correct, Ian. We've actually had a lot of trouble overlapping the stakeholders that need to be there with the schedule. We were trying to do it this week and nobody meshed up. So the consultant had been on vacation for the last week or so, and I will be calling him after this meeting to get his schedule. And then Ian, I believe I've sent you an email to get your staff schedule, and then I'll talk to Spotsylvania and a few of the other entities, and we will try to get this going, like you said, in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Are there any other comments to Adam on the UPWP? Mr. Chair, we can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Yep, I clicked myself off. So I guess there's no further comments. Stacy, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead moving into the community engagement and equity plan update.
Sure. Good morning. So currently we are working on updating what has been up until this point known as our public participation plan and then a separate Title VI plan. Over the past year, I've realized that the two are very intertwined. When you do public engagement, or we're calling it community engagement in this plan, you have to incorporate those non-discrimination policies and be proactive with reaching protected groups. So this time around with revisions, we're rewriting the entire two documents, but merging them into one and calling it our community engagement and equity plan. We started the process in February, and if you can scroll down a bit on the screen. Yep, thank you. So we just wrapped up a focus group, which was composed of about 25 community members and staff that work through different social services agencies to provide feedback on our public outreach strategies. We had about 4 sessions and they gave awesome feedback. I'm currently working to incorporate all their ideas into our draft plan. We will be presenting the draft plan to the policy committee next week and ask them to approve a 45-day public comment period. So you all will have 45 days to review the plan. We're going to present the draft plan to TAC on May 3rd. And then our goal is to have a policy vote to adopt the plan in June timeframe, and then begin implementing the new plan sometime this fall. Any questions on this? No? Okay, back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, with no questions, I guess, would you mind go ahead and roll into the update on the public comments?
Sure. So we can scratch number 2 off this list here. As Adam had mentioned earlier, we no longer need to do an amendment to the current UPWP. However, next week we are going to ask the policy committee to approve public comment periods for 4 different documents. The one I just mentioned, the community engagement and equity plan, that is the only one that's going to be for 45-day time period. We also are asking them to kick off public comment period for our 2022 UPWP, and then also an amendment to the TIP. And so you can see the details there and our anticipated timeline below. After the policy launches the public comment periods, we will be sending around an email with more information on how you can provide public comment, and we would appreciate if you could share those emails with those that you serve in your community and your public relations staff if you have those. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Stacy, I did have a question just about the UPWP, basically for the FY21 amendment. Can someone explain like why that's no longer needed?
I will turn that over to Ian or Adam.
Paul, thanks. It's got to do with we agreed with BDOT to actually have the previous deprogramming. Sorry, I can't say that word all of a sudden this morning. The previous deprogramming request cancelled. So the funds are still available that would have been deprogrammed in the last financial year. So we no longer need to do it this financial year.
And was that just to kind of carry over funds directly, like from FY21 to FY22?
Yes, basically.
Okay.
It just makes it easier to do it that way. Unless there are other comments, Mr. Chair, back to you.
All right, well, hearing no further comments, I guess, Ian, if you could go ahead, give us the update on the RFP for the on-call consultants.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, I've been talking about this RFP for quite some time. We've now completed the work on the RFP. VDOT has given us amendments, which we've incorporated. The attorneys have given us amendments, which we've incorporated. And both the staff at FAMPO and GWRC have both workshopped the details, and we're happy with it. The policy committee will be asked at the April meeting to accept the RFP, and we aim to go out for requests for proposals on the 3rd of May. I think it's the first Monday in May, for a new batch of on-call consultants, and then we will score them and request GWRC to sign contracts with new consultants, which will put us in a really great position for the future. So the process is basically complete. We just need the policy committee to agree to the RFP at their meeting. If anybody wants a copy of the whole technical document, I'll happily email it to whoever wants it. But we're not intending to make any more changes now. It's been through all the legal processes in terms of the attorneys, VDOT, and everybody else. So just please let me know if you want a copy. I'll happily email you the full 20-something page document. That's all I have on that item, Mr. Chair. I don't believe there's any requirement for the TAC to make a decision on that. It's just an update.
All right, if there's no questions or comments, we'll go ahead and move on to item 7J, which is the Transportation Alternatives Funding Update. As I spoke at our last meeting, here at Stafford, we are looking to cancel the Onville Road Sidewalk Improvement Project, as we are including those sidewalk improvements with an Onville Road roadway improvement project as well. And so we're looking to transfer some of that available transportation alternatives funding off of the Onville Road project and onto our Flatford Road project in order to fully fund that project and get it ready for advertisement for construction here in October. So with that, really, we've got just this resolution in front of the committee today for approval to go ahead and make that transfer for just shy about $300,000 from Onville over to the Flatford Road project.
Hey, Alex, it's
Yes.
Susan. Because y'all have not officially canceled that project, I'm unable to move the funds off of the Onville, but I did move the funds off of the TMA TAP funding, so Flatford will still get funded. But just to let you know that that's what's going on. It's actually coming.
Well, I'll submit get that resolution to you so we can go ahead and complete the full transfer then.
Yeah, so what'll happen is those funds, when you do the resolution for Onville, I'll just put those back into the balance entry, and then this can move forward.
Okay.
So I don't have to wait for y'all's resolution. I can go, this can move forward, and you can have the project Flatford fully funded before you get your resolution.
Okay, great. Well, thanks.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And that's really had on this item, unless anyone else has any other questions. And if not, then thanks again to Carrie and Susan for help working together to get this, put this together for me.
Glad we were able to get it done.
All right, with that, I guess we'll move on to item number 8, which is correspondence.
Do you need to call for a motion for this? You need to. I think
Sorry,
you
yeah,
need to
we
get
never finished up that. Sorry. Good call. Thanks, Carrie. So yeah, can I get a motion then to approve for the resolution?
A motion to approve from Paul from Spotsylvania.
This is Nick Miner, I second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. So next now, if I move on to item number 8, which is correspondence.
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any new correspondence, but I would just like to check with our Stacy, our public engagement person, whether she's aware of any other correspondence that I'm not aware of.
No, I am not.
Great.
All right, I guess we'll move on then to staff reports.
Mr. Chair, there's been no new staff changes at FAMPO. We are advertising for an additional full-time planner, and we'll update you when we get results of that process.
Okay. All right, then I guess we'll go ahead and move on to number 10, which is member reports. I'll start off here with Stafford County. We really don't have anything to update or give a report on. Do any other members have any reports to give?
This is Stephen at VDOT. I just want to remind everyone that our spring public hearing for 6-year improvement plan for the district is Tuesday, April 27th from 6 to 8. If you have any questions, let me know. And also you can check out ctb.virginia.gov for the 6-year plan and other information about that meeting.
Mr. Chair, this is, go ahead.
Hey, it's Susan at VDOT. Just want everybody to know, of localities to remember, coming up in the next couple of weeks, you also have the TAP workshop that's coming up, and you have the revenue sharing workshop that is coming up. So if you've not signed up, please go ahead and sign up for those.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Jackson with the city. I just wanted to introduce everybody. Michael Craig goes by Mike Craig with the city of Fredericksburg. He is a senior planner for the city and is on TAC as an alternate.
Okay, welcome, Mike.
Hello, thank all of you guys for your time.
This is Nick Miner. Where can I sign up for those workshops at the VDOT website?
Yes, go on to the VDOT website and go to local assistance program, and you should be able to find them there. If not, just call me here at the office at 899-4103, and I can make sure I email the connections to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. King George, we have no report. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Chair, just as a final comment for myself before the meeting wraps up, I think as everybody can see on this agenda, there are a ton of documents that the staff have prepared in the last month. And I just want to, from my own part, thank the staff. Many of them have worked many hours on some very complicated transportation scoring methodologies on the UPWP that Adam has been working on, and so many of these different documents that you've seen in front of you have taken many hours. I just wanted to thank them all for all that hard work.
All right, if there's nothing else from any other members, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Nick Miner. I second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll adjourn the meeting and see you back in May 3rd. Thanks, everybody.
Ciao, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.